Welcome and thank you for joining us here today. My name is Dave Turk. I'm the Acting Deputy Executive Director here at the IA, and I have the privilege of moderating this terrific session today. It's a great pleasure to be with you, especially for this fourth session. I may be biased, but I think this is the best of all the sessions that my colleague Brian and his team have put on today. It's just a terrific group of ministers and other leading experts on efficiency. So thank you all for participating. Because this is a special session, we have a special treat, and that our Executive Director, Dr. Fatih Birol, would like to speak for a few minutes before we get started. So Fatih, over to you.
Thank you very much, Dave. Dear colleagues, it is great to see so many good friends and colleagues around the world. It's a great pleasure. This is our fifth annual global conference on energy efficiency. It is the biggest one. Last year, we met in Dublin, chaired by Prime Minister Leo Varadkar, and I am thankful to him. And this year, we are doing on a virtual format, and I can tell you that this is the third or fourth session since in the morning we are making, depending on the time zone. And my colleagues told me about 10,000 people. 10,000 people are following this debate, which makes us very happy. We have many ministers, as you see here, and many CEOs and thought leaders throughout the day. Now, energy efficiency is the very first field for the IEA, and it is all our work gets a strong emphasis on energy efficiency. And here, I wanted to take 2 minutes of your time to talk about the sustainable recovery and energy efficiency. We cannot avoid the very fact that today many countries around the world are under the threat of COVID-19. It's an economic threat, medical threat, and government's very first job is to address the COVID threat. But at the same time, we know that there is another big challenge, such as climate. So we thought, as the International Energy Agency, what the world needs to do within the next 3 years, between now and 2023, in order to give a boost to global economy, create jobs, and prepare a clean energy future. And we worked with the International Monetary Fund and came up with a sustainable recovery plan. A sustainable recovery plan. And this plan, within next 3 years of time, focuses on 3 main energy policies. We look at all the energy policies, but for these 3 years, we thought which policies can bring immediately jobs, provide growth to economy, and prepare a clean energy future. What are those 3 policies? 1, acceleration of solar and wind installations. Creates jobs, boosts the economy, and at the same time, good for the clean energy. Second, modernization and strengthening of the electricity grids around the world. Electricity grids, which brings the, on one hand, the renewables better in the grid, and also for the security of electricity, it is very important. Third, the topic of today, energy efficiency. This is energy efficiency, dear colleagues. In my view, if I have to nickname energy efficiency, I would nickname it as a job machine. Energy efficiency creates jobs. Jobs, jobs, jobs. It is what we need today, because employment will be a big issue around the world, across the economy, but especially in the construction sector and beyond. And energy efficiency policies, especially in the building sector, will create a lot of jobs. Therefore, we are very keen to push this as an important area in our sustainable recovery plan. Now, our sustainable recovery plan talks about energy efficiency, and I am very thankful our Global Commission for Action, Urgent Action Energy Efficiency came up with 10 top key urgent actionable measures, which was published yesterday, already major dissemination. Again, I thank to members of that commission, and we have a few of the colleagues here, part of our commission members, and under the leadership of Prime Minister Varadkar, we have this practical actions the governments can take, and this will be a guidebook for us for many years to come. We are going to raise it around the world. Now, to finish here, we are very happy that these three areas, namely sustainable steps in terms of the energy efficiency improvement, increasing the installation of solar and wind and other renewable energies, and at the same time strengthen the grid, will bring us a cleaner and more resilient energy future. And this is a major global issue. It is the reason why we are, as IEA, organizing on 9th of July, Clean Energy Transition Summit, which brings more than 40 ministers around the world, which makes about 80% of the global economy, to talk about the energy efficiency and other issues, to go to from data to recommendation, from recommendation to action. This is what we are going to discuss with the ministers from Canada, United States, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, all European ministers, China, India, Indonesia, Philippines, Japan, Korea, all the ministers, and we are very much looking forward to our summit. And your views here, your perspectives here will be reflected in that very meeting and its conclusions. I want to thank once again to all of you to be a part of our discussion. Many people are following us, and I want to thank also my colleague, Dr. Brian Motherway, our energy efficiency guru, for following this work and organizing this meeting. Thank you very much, and I now turn to my colleague, Dave Turk, who is our Deputy Executive Director.
Thank you very much, Dr. Birol, and thanks for your special appearance here for this incredibly special panel as well. And welcome again to all our speakers and the 10,000 plus strong live stream audience as well. This is our fourth session of today, and this session in particular is focused on engaging all levels of society to accelerate efficiency progress. Just as a bit of a recap, it builds upon the three previous sessions. First, we focused on prioritizing energy efficiency in a sustainable economic recovery. Second session explored how energy efficiency can boost jobs and support development. And then the third session focusing on the global view and global best practice. How can we learn from each other? My job is to try to make this session as dynamic as it possibly can be. And we have two tools to try to help engage, including our live stream audience. First, if you have questions for this session, please send them along to the email address that is on the screen now, energy.efficiency@iea.org. We will be asking our terrific panel at the tail end of their introductory remarks questions, and I'd very much like to have some challenging, thought-provoking questions from our audience. So we will certainly prioritize that. Secondly, we have a series of polling questions, again, to try to engage everybody and to try to think, to get a sense of what's on everybody's mind and answering some of these questions. So we're going to provide that through the menti.com platform. If you haven't already done so at an earlier session, if you log into that homepage, all you need to do is insert that 5-digit code, 541756, and then the questions will pop up throughout the session. We're actually going to start with a polling question from the previous session and show the results of that. So if we could put that on the screen. The question again, for those who weren't part of the previous session, which of energy efficiency's multiple benefits do you think resonates the most with people? And you can see there the results. No surprise, especially in this time of economic challenge around the world, the one that received the most is lowering energy bills. You can see with 34. A number of others around the same level, 13, making it the second highest, making daily life more convenient and comfortable. Again, consumer choice, consumer preference, making it easy and comfortable for consumers to take advantage of energy efficiency opportunities. Mitigating climate change, a very strong contender. Creating jobs, as our executive director stressed, as energy efficiency is the jobs machine. All right, let's move on to a question now that we'll ask all our audience, including our virtual audience out there. You'll see this popping up on your screen shortly. And again, we'll ask a few questions throughout the session. So if you log in once through menti.com with the code 541756, you'll have access to all these questions as we go along. And certainly encourage all our speakers, if there's something interesting in the polling that you see, feel free to touch on that, certainly in your prepared remarks, and I may follow up with questions for all of you as well. The question in front of us all now is, what single action should governments take to accelerate energy efficiency globally? And you see the 5 answers there. 1, strengthen energy efficiency standards. 2, encourage behavior change, something that's getting a lot of discussion in this time of COVID economic challenge. 3, enhancing smart grids and digital technologies. 4, making greater use of carbon taxation and pricing. And at the far end with green there, setting stronger national targets. Let's just give this a few minutes to have people log in. And again, for those who don't normally do these kinds of things, we're not asking you to download an app or do anything like that. All you have to do is literally log into menti.com, put in the 6-digit code, and then it makes it incredibly easy for you to participate. So it looks like we have 2 leading contenders. I won't say neck and neck because they're about 6 or 5 apart. The first there you see on the left is strengthening energy efficiency standards. Certainly a lot of work that we do at the IEA trying to highlight best practices, countries that are doing a particularly good job on that so that others can learn from those countries. At second place, setting stronger national targets. If you don't have a target, you don't know where you want to go, then you're probably not going to get there. And then the third, encourage behavior change, the pink there, second from the left, among energy users. All right, thank you again for those who participated. We'll have further of these through the session today, and again, encourage our speakers to pick up on these results. All right, we've got a jam-packed series of keynoters and then 3 panelists as well. So what I'll ask each of our keynoters to do is to give your prepared remarks. Again, feel free to react impromptu to the polling questions or other things you heard from our executive director or previous sessions. For each of the keynoters, I will ask you a question that we have not prepared ahead of time. For those who have sat through a lot of Zoom calls, and I suspect many of us have sat through a lot of Zoom calls and GoToMeetings, other virtual meetings, I find it most useful when you put people a bit on the spot. I won't put you all that much on the spot. It'll be related to energy efficiency, but I know you all are incredibly sharp and talented with such terrific experience. So we'll try to engage you at least with 1 follow-up question for each of the keynoters to try to make it as interesting and interactive as this session possibly can. So let me introduce each of the keynoters now, and then we'll go with the opening remarks and 1 follow-up question. First up is Her Excellency Ms. Teresa Ribera, the Spanish Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for the Ecological Transition. Ms. Ribera, as you'll see from many of the speakers today, is a member of this Global Commission for Urgent Action on Energy Efficiency that our Executive Director spoke about, and that hopefully many of you have seen the report. It's on our website for those who haven't. Again, Minister Rivera, thank you very much for your participation and all your leadership and ideas feeding in to that process. Please, Madam Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And don't put me too much on the spot, since I have just come from the cabinet meeting and I have just got the approval of my colleagues to a royal decree on auctioning renewable energy and related things. So I'm already been on the spot this morning. So please do take me with much care when putting me on the spot. So once I made my small joke, thank you so much for the invitation and congratulations for a great job. I think that this is fascinating. And as Fatih used to say, it's true that efficiency is something everybody loves to say. It is quite important, quite intelligent, quite smart, but then it is very difficult to see sound and aggressive, audacious programs on energy efficiency. Even more, when we talk about what we fear and what we do, we realize to what extent we say we want to honor our Paris climate commitments, we want to create jobs, we want to improve the efficiency of our economy, and then we invest there where we follow our fears. And this is something we need to break, and we need to make things in a different manner. And regulators have a very relevant role to play. I think that the fact that we improve our capacity to develop a concrete, a common taxonomy on sustainable investment is very important. So I think that as Europeans, we must be proud for this happening this week. And at the same time, we know that when we talk about recovery and digitalization, we are also talking about energy efficiency, not just connectivity for many other uses, but also a much more easier way to deal with energy efficiency. So the main question you wanted us to address this afternoon is how we can manage to engage people, the different levels of society, in energy efficiency programs and support, how we can convince our neighbors, our citizens to full renovating their buildings, or how we can incentivize our companies and industries to invest in energy efficiency. The fact is that whenever we implement an energy efficiency program, we multiply by 3 the amount of money being invested, and we create a much more efficient way to produce things, or a much more positive way to live in our own household. So I think that the answers you've got in your questionnaire is quite sound, because the bold question is to make our own savings in the energy bill, but all the other answers do matter. So I think that this is relevant, how we can connect positive image, positive conclusions to energy efficiency programs, and how we can make things easier. So it's not, it doesn't take so long, so many complicated administrative burdens, but it is easy to invest in energy efficiency. And I think that there is a combination of good recipes that are reflected in your paper, in the paper of the agency, that I would like to summarize, because I think it goes much along with the most successful policies we have already identified in many places. The first of them being a cultural connection, an engagement of all levels of civil society with all these positive values, as you have said. And the fiscal systems do help to do so, not just the regulatory systems. The regulatory context is important because it sets the framework, but then the fiscal signals are relevant in order to improve, to push the innovative financing model. In that context, we have a long track record of bringing energy savings through the polluter pays principle taxation. At the same time, additional support measures do help to get a positive reaction when targeting different groups, very particularly the most vulnerable groups. I think that facilitating things and trying to identify the social dimension of investing in energy efficiency is very, very important. Tailor-made financing formulas can massively release investments that could otherwise remain unexploited. And reducing the risk involved to energy efficiency is also important. So supporting housing owners in building renovation projects is relevant. Promoting long-term green credit lines is important. We're unfolding accessible advisory tools for consumers to help to understand that it is not such a big task, but something that it is more achievable and easy than previously thought. In that context, I think that we can also design in the recovery framework bigger plans. We can think of urban retrofitting and not just the refurbishment of buildings, but working on popular neighborhoods so that the neighborhood as a whole does improve the quality of life for the neighbors, for the families, and in that context, we invest in the retrofitting of buildings is quite an interesting way to address this issue, and it has an immediate payback in terms of social response and emotional connection to the projects. We try to get a big share of our plans on the energy on the green recovery in that context. Our impression is that 90% of the public supports this type of measures, so that it is easier to improve the insulation of buildings, of households, and it has, as I said, a much more positive impact in vulnerable households where the connection to other type of improvements, including accessibility and so on, is managed at the same time. So getting energy efficiency in a broader context may be a good way to facilitate large-scale plans of refurbishment of buildings. And as I say, digitalization is a great tool for energy efficiency and a quick learning process of the positive consequences of doing so. This applies to the grids, this applies to the households, and in the context of the small devices that we all use at home, the thermostats, the occupancy sensors, the remote control, the enhanced safety features. So combining the two types of policies may help a lot to facilitate an easy implication, an easy involvement of the citizens, the business, and the finance community in a new role, in a new life of energy efficiency programs, so to be used, as Fatih Vidal said, a machine of job creation in a context where we need job creation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Minister. And your reputation certainly precedes you, so I don't think there's a question I could theoretically ask you that you wouldn't have a good, sound, well thought through answer for. I just want to pick up real quick for your follow-up question. You mentioned the broad support for energy efficiency, 90% for certain policy. You also mentioned the importance of making it easier for consumers. One of the challenges, of course, is there's varying levels of government, whether it's the federal government, which you're currently occupying as the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Ecological Transition, but also state, municipal, other levels of government. What are your lessons learned from your experience of how to work with those levels of government to make sure everybody's on the same page and really promoting the kind of energy efficiency, especially during this time where we need that jobs machine to really come through for all our societies? So any advice of how to work with those varying levels of government?
Well, I guess that there is no single question to your answer, but I will share with you some internal comments that may be something in common with other federal governments. When we try to push for this type of big programs, in a very surprising way, it was the state governments or many state governments that were complaining, saying, well, in our country, in our state, it's very difficult to push for these programs. People do not like to move from their homes for a while, so we are not sure we want to push for this. So the resistance, the complication, the technical complication and the bureaucracy complication, so to put so many things at the same time on the table. So what we decided to do was to make a public competitive call, so that we were inviting to cities, to mayors, to propose themselves to follow this line. And then there are always audacious, courageous, and very engaged people in the different levels of governance that do feel that this is what they need to do, what they want to do, and they get the public support of their own citizens, and things start to become a little bit easier. Of course, we still have so many things to do that we are far away from achieving our own target, our own goal, but our impression is that following by example, because you get this positive envy on what others do, is maybe quite a good idea to promote a general response in the good direction when there are resistance to move towards the goal we want to achieve.
Well, thank you, Madam Minister, Minister Rivera, for your excellent comments and then your excellent answer as well to the question. I'd love to try to stump you with a question at some point, but we'll have to wait for a future opportunity to try to do so. Next, I'd like to introduce Her Excellency Dr. Leonore Gewessler, Minister of Climate Action, Environment, Energy, Mobility, Innovation, and Technology from Austria. Minister Gewessler, I'm not sure you have enough in your portfolio. It seems like you should have at least another few dozen very important topics, and very much appreciate you sharing your time with us today. Over to you for your introductory remarks.
Thanks a lot for this very nice and kind introduction. Dear colleagues, dear ladies and gentlemen listening to us, first of all, thanks a lot for the invitation to this conference. I'm very happy to share on this occasion the Austrian perspective, the Austrian contributions on energy efficiency, what we are trying to do, what are our ideas and plans regarding the engagement also of all levels of society. But I would really like to start with a thank you to the International Energy Agency for addressing the issue, because given the fact how important energy efficiency is as a building block in the energy transition, we talk about it much too little. And so I'm here not only to share, I'm also here to listen and learn, because I think most of us would agree efficiency is one of the most challenging sectors in the energy transition and in the energy policy. So I'm very keen also to listen to my colleagues. So what's the framework? Dr. Birol already mentioned it. I don't think I need to elaborate a lot on that. The COVID crisis is, of course, an enormous challenge, both economically and socially, but it is also and can also be seen as an opportunity to build back better, to rebuild our societies in a more sustainable way, because the climate crisis has not stopped. It has not been on pause during the COVID crisis, and there will also not be a vaccination against the climate crisis unless we go into immediate action and climate action. So Austria committed itself to reaching climate neutrality in 2040 within its own premises. So for this reason, climate protection is also a key pillar of the stimulus packages that our own stimulus packages that we do now on the Austrian level. But we're also very pleased that at the European level, we're discussing a number of options for the recovery, and it's paramount that we link the recovery plans to our climate ambition, to our efficiency ambition, and that for a European perspective, the Green Deal stays at the heart of the recovery, not only as a climate strategy, but as an economic strategy. So I totally agree with Dr. Birol, and that's also why we are very happy that at the European level, there's now the renovation wave coming, also with a financing aspect to it, because that's exactly in the transport and in the building sector where we can have this double benefit of doing something in terms of efficiency, in terms of climate action, and putting people back to work to save and to create to create jobs, especially at a time where this is what we need. So what are we doing now concretely in Austria in terms of policy and engagement? Because I'm convinced this needs to go hand in hand. So first of all, we try to approach the issue as really the energy transformation that it is. So a transformation of really our society. So we're working on not just on the side of producing energy, but really also to increase the sector coupling. We're working on a climate law that for the necessary political framework, and we're working on a tax reform. I will not elaborate on this now a lot longer, but I think this is one of the fundamental building blocks also in terms of efficiency. And we're working on a new energy efficiency law. So, and I'd like to take it from there and then focus a bit on the building sector in terms of what we're doing. So for the energy efficiency law, I'm a fan of clear rules. They allow for stability, for security, they give orientation. So we're working on an energy efficiency act that combines two levels. On the one hand, it combines an obligation for strategic measures for energy companies to help consumers reduce their energy consumption. On the other hand, we're also planning to establish a fund for energy efficiency, where the means raised for this fund will finance energy efficiency measures in households with a special focus on low-income households. And it is very important for us that the public and especially also all the relevant stakeholders are involved in the shaping of this act. So before now really diving into the legislative process, we organized a very broad participatory process to review the existing act, to bring in experiences and views from different parts of society. So if we look at one of the sectors where I think there's, we all probably are convinced we need to do a lot, and it's the building sector that has a central role regarding decarbonization and regarding efficiency. And also in Austria, it's about 27% of the final energy consumption is used for space heating, for hot water, for cooling in buildings. And the building sector is especially challenging because what you mentioned, the question you posed to Teresa earlier is exactly the question that we face. Competencies for the building sector are on all different levels of society, of governments. So we need to engage all the different levels of society, and we're just starting now with what we call a heating strategy, where we get all the actors around the table to discuss how our different measures complement each other, how we can better create synergies, because the goals we have are very ambitious. We need to save more than 3 million tons of CO2. We want to increase the renovation rate to 3% a year. We are working on a heating strategy where we set the course for the complete decarbonization of the heating market through the increased use of biomass, of solar heat, of ambient heat, and also heat from waste management. But I think the key task in this is also is how we address the concrete change and the concrete measures that are needed, because they are a deeper approach as we've had until now. And so we need really all the actors involved to address the challenge ahead. So we're trying to do 3 steps in this regard. The first step is to show that the government is going ahead, so that we act what we actually act in our own premises, what we preach. I think it's not the correct English formulation of this, but I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. So our government is committed for all the public institutions to achieve the renovation rate very quickly, that new buildings are only built on the highest building standards, that we finally switch all buildings to renewable energy only, that we from 2022 new vehicles are zero emission vehicles, etc., etc. So first, we're trying to be a good example. The second is that we create incentives to take action, to lower the effort needed for individual action. That's also something Teresa referred to, make it as easy as possible for people to be active themselves. So a part of our stimulus package is a renovation campaign where we invest 750 million euro for thermal renovation until 2023. Also here, we place a focus on low income and energy poverty households. But we also want to provide impulses to investments through grants, through tax benefits, through a legal framework that allow that, especially in the field of building renovation, so that we can really try to get some dynamic into this field. And the third part that we do is that we really work hard on communicating and promoting individual action. There is one initiative that's a long-standing initiative in Austria. It's called Klima Aktiv. For a literal translation, it would be climate active. It's pursuing a comprehensive participatory approach to introducing and promoting climate-friendly technologies. So we've had engaged with about 22,000 relevant actors and multipliers in companies. Around 44,000 individuals are currently cooperating. The initiative held about 21,000 courses regarding energy efficiency and renewable energy in the last 15 years. It develops and provides quality standards, helped improve buildings with around 2.2 million square meters, trains experts, provides information, advice to a large network of partners. And so it complements in a very substantial way the efforts that we do with the legal framework, that we do with subsidies and regulations. And I think this is a quite unique thing and something we're also very happy to be able to accompany, because I think it's really paramount that we convince people that we show the enormous potential and importance of energy efficiency. And I think this, when trying to make energy efficiency mainstream, I think this is probably one of the biggest tasks, that we change the narrative. That energy efficiency is not about sacrifice. It's not about, sacrifice is probably the best picture, but that it's actually, it's a project that is bound, for example, to technological leadership for our industry, so that there's a lot of chance in this sector. And I think this is probably one of the toughest challenges. So I'm very happy also to hear from others how they are tackling that. Thanks a lot.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Minister. Excellent remarks and terrific specific examples from the Austrian context. Follow-up question for you, and if you could, a brief answer. As moderator, I want to make sure we stay on time, and I'll get in trouble and won't be asked to moderate again if I don't do that. But really want to pick up on your, you said policy and engagement really need to go hand in hand, and you need to work on both of those. And you offered the Klima Active example in particular. One part of societies around the world that are certainly pushing for climate action are young people, the youth around the world, a real driver in a lot of societies, really pushing for bold action in governments. How do you think we can get young people around the world more excited, more engaged on efficiency in particular, and really pushing governments at all levels to really step up to the plate on the efficiency improvement side of things? Any thoughts for us on that?
I fear I can be very brief on that, because that's it's part of the broader picture. I mean, I really have to say that youth in Austria is extremely active and working really on all levels of the issue. And we're just currently in a popular initiative on climate action that also addresses energy efficiency, and that is really carried by people that come from Fridays for Future. We are trying in the new climate law, and that's maybe one aspect I can contribute besides the usual awareness raising, interacting, is taking the exchange seriously with all the youth actors out there. I think one of the things that we are trying to do is also in the climate law to actually make sure they are there as a relevant partner on the exchange, as a relevant voice for policymaking, and also to give youth as a standing and a seat in the debate. I think that's also an important thing we need to do, because it's not only about our future, but more so about theirs on this planet and in our countries.
Excellent. Well, thank you again, Madam Minister, for participating today, and thanks for all the terrific leadership in Austria and beyond as well. Certainly, as you said, we're all learning from each other, but there's a lot to be learned from what you're doing in the Austrian context. Next, we'll turn to His Excellency, Mr. Richard Bruton, the Minister for Climate Action and Environment for Ireland. And Mr. Bruton, I want to thank you for two things in particular. One, thank you for chairing the meeting of the Global Commission here in Paris last December, and for all your leadership in the Commission more generally. And then secondly, I think I need to thank you and your countrymen for giving us Brian Motherway for being such a terrific leader for us in the IEA and leading our energy efficiency team. So Minister Bruton, the floor is yours. Over to you.
Oh, okay, thanks very much indeed. I hope you can hear me all right, can you? Very
yes,
good.
Just fine.
No, first of all, I'd just like to say we've just come from negotiating for the formation of a new government, of which our party is one party, along with Green Party and another centrist party. And that has been a very interesting process, and we're voting at the moment this week. It will be a government that will have climate at the very heart of its ambitions. We've set a 7% per annum reduction in carbon emissions to be achieved each year, or not each year, but over the decade 2020 to 2030. So that puts us along with the Danes in terms of ambition. I suppose I'm also an economist by trade, and I recently have been reading that great economist John Maynard Keynes, the economist of the Great Depression, and I suppose his quote about when thrift is awake but enterprise is asleep, wealth will decay, puts me in mind of the present situation, because we have a lot of enterprise that has been on life support in a sort of a comatose, and the real challenge now is that it falls to government to reignite enterprise. And I suppose that represents, in my view, an extraordinary opportunity for governments to actually get it right. There's this window of opportunity when the economy needs governments to step up to the plate. So we must design the stimulus package as well. And we will be building the renovation wage retrofitting right at the heart of that, as well as other measures that can have an impact. I think you must also think to embed the structural changes that we've already seen in COVID. We are providing a national broadband that will bring fibre to the home, to every premises in the country, a very ambitious, but there's also smaller ways, e-health, cycling, things that can really be done quickly that change the way people think about their traditional behaviours. The other thing I think, as Fatih had said at the very beginning, is selecting the right long-term investments. We have opportunities in the renewable sector with our huge offshore capacity, but also correspondingly we need a massive interconnection. So there are real opportunities in a small island economy like ours to make changes. I think also we must think about how we design enterprise support. I mean, enterprise is on its knees. We can't, bring in a lot of cost increasing regulation, but we can give signposts as to the direction of regulation. And we can also put pressure on the financial institutions in the approach they make to ensure that enterprises who are looking at recovery planning build into it energy efficiency, build into it sustainability for the longer term. And we need to get audit tools into our enterprise sector to make sure that that can happen. I suppose the other thing that we need to think about, and it's I suppose the topic of this, is how do we mobilize large numbers to engage in energy efficiency initiatives. And from our point of view, we're very much designing it both top down and bottom up. Top down, we have a national program now where we're trying to do aggregated retrofitting in areas together. So you do it at scale. very large-scale intervention. So that requires the state to mobilize finance, to support the supply chain, to foster the one-stop shops that can engage with people, to offer state guarantees for some of the financial implements, and to gradually build up the regulatory framework so that there's that pressure and momentum to change. But I think equally, as other speakers have said, there has to be a level of engagement. There has to be a vision that people can buy into. And I think we have been successful at mobilizing. For example, our Green Schools initiative is a really, really strong program that, well over half of the schools are now engaged in looking at how do they manage their affairs and their communities. We've built also sustainable energy communities, well over 300 of them now, who are empowered to develop energy saving plans for their neighborhood. I think we also need to engage with the local authorities, and we will be using the local authorities as a key, I suppose, element of the rolling out of this, because they are very networked. They can leverage whatever spending we're putting in, and they're generally trusted in their neighborhood. So they are big players. I think we also need to engage with a lot of corporates who recognize the need. I suppose corporate social responsibility is increasingly recognizing the planet as a part of that. I think that's something that we need to seize and push corporates to make the sort of pledges that should be there, and push them to be competitive about how they are delivering change, and to have demonstration projects in our neighborhoods that can show that our leading corporates are stepping up to this responsibility. So I think our new program for government will have 16 key platforms to build to underpin this ambition. We'll have climate budgets. They'll be driven from the Prime Minister's office. We're adapting a lot of the learning we had in previous crises, I suppose, to ensure that we can build momentum around this recovery in a sustainable fashion. So I think there's a golden opportunity now for governments to seize this opportunity, and certainly it's an exciting prospect, albeit that we're starting from a very difficult environment after the COVID crisis.
Thank you very much, Minister Bruton. Just excellent remarks, and good luck with the government formation and the leadership from Ireland really pushing the boundaries and trying to move as quickly as possible. Just wanted to pick up for your follow-up question. You mentioned the extraordinary, you used golden opportunity as well for governments to get it right, that this is a real opportunity. First of all, that puts a lot of pressure on your shoulders and your colleagues in Ireland and others of our ministers and others. I'm wondering, you mentioned corporates as well. What do you think is driving corporate behavior? How can governments work with companies so that companies also feel invested, like this is their moment to get it right when it comes to efficiency opportunities, in the face of course, challenging economic times? Just any further thoughts you have on that end about what drives corporate behavior and how in Ireland you're working with the corporate leadership?
Well, I suppose in Ireland, as in many countries, you do have a sort of a dual economy. You have the very large corporates who can, for example, look at becoming entirely dependent on renewable energy instead of using fossil fuels. They can adopt very strong low plastics, circular economy policies, and they are operating. And I think it's a question of encouraging them to take that leadership role. Then you have the small and medium-sized industries, many of whom now are just hanging on by their fingernails. And I suppose the question there, I think, is to design tools that, as we seek to keep them afloat, that we build sustainability measures into that process, that they are expected to do audits of their energy, of their carbon footprint, that they build into their strategies for the future, becoming more resilient in those spheres. We have, of course, a large farming industry here, and equally it will be challenging to persuade farmers that making their farm more carbon efficient and less emitting really creates a resilient farm for the future. So there is a lot of work, I think, in building and designing the policy tools that support enterprise that making them lean and climate efficient, energy efficient, has to be built into the design of policy tools as we try and lift them out of the depression they're in. But also, I think putting obligations on the financial institutions. I think there's a lot of greenwashing from financial institutions as opposed to genuinely redesigning their financial instruments to drive efficiency and carbon reductions.
Thank you very much, Minister Bruton, and best of luck with all that's on your plate. We have two more keynoters, both of whom are under some time sensitivity pressures, and then we have our panelists as well. So we'll go through both keynoters. We'll try to do it quickly if both of you can, so you both are able to speak, and then we'll certainly get to our excellent panel as well. Next up is Mr. Alfonso Cusi, who's the Secretary of Energy for the Philippines, and yet another member of the Global Commission for Urgent Action on Energy Efficiency. So Secretary Cusi, over to you.
Unmute myself. Okay. Well, distinguished panels, all my participants in this conference, friends, ladies and gentlemen, to all the listeners. Before I proceed, I would like to greet all of you a pleasant day. It's night time here in Manila, and I say good evening from Manila. I'm delighted that the International Energy Agency has decided to push through with its annual global conference on energy efficiency. At this time, when the whole world is still battling the COVID-19 pandemic, hopefully our scientific community can find a cure at the soonest possible time so that we can continue with our pre-COVID-19 era lives, or at least a semblance of it. With the COVID-19 pandemic, industries have been faced with the challenge of continuing operation amidst threats to the personal health and safety of their workforce. In the Philippines, our government has addressed this issue by temporarily limiting the movement of our population since March through enforced community quarantines as ordered by President Rodrigo Duterte to help prevent the spread of the virus and save the population. I guess we all here agree that no one was prepared for this pandemic. Even the most developed countries were initially in the dark on how to prevent the spread of the virus. How much more the developing countries like the Philippines. But I'm proud to share that the Philippines was able to manage the situation well. The Duterte administration and the government stood up to the challenge. We are now slowly easing up restrictions to revive our economy with certain health protocols imposed. In the energy sector, we have put in place health standards as well as developed new COVID-19 response protocol, both of which are now being strictly enforced. Since day one of the lockdown, the country's energy sector was at the front line to ensure that we respond to the crisis effectively and efficiently. The Department of Energy saw to it that the delivery of energy goods and services were unhampered, knowing the importance of electricity to our everyday lives. Thus, I have directed the agencies under the DOE and asked the industry stakeholders to submit their business continuity plans, or BCPs, considering a COVID-19 worst possible scenarios. For example, if their office or plant personnel are no longer able to report for work because they have been infected by the virus, these BCPs are reviewed and updated accordingly, which now include measures as we transition into the new normal. Members of the Philippine Energy family rallied to fulfill our backliner role, ensuring the sufficient energy is available to all the households, hospitals, and other institutions doing vital operation to curb the pandemic. The limited movement during the quarantine has resulted to excess power supply because of the drop in our power demand levels. However, the reduced consumption posed a problem to power generation companies due to revenue losses, since they continued operations despite the lack of demand, just to ensure that power supply is readily available when needed. The DOE already initiated measures to help them. On the average, power demand nationwide was 30% lower than its pre-lockdown levels. Another challenge that we are facing at this time is the opening of schools here in the Philippines, which was originally set in June, but now moved to August. Face-to-face learning is not yet allowed in the country. Thus, we are going to rely on the internet and online learning. To this end, I directed the concerned agencies to ensure that our students in the far-flung provinces are getting stable power supply all throughout the school year. Electricity, along with internet connectivity, will be a big factor in ensuring the success of distance education, especially in our remote areas. As the country enters the new normal phase, power demand has been gradually rising in recent weeks. Amid these developments, we remain firm in our resolve to ensure the availability of access to energy services throughout the country at all times. No doubt, COVID-19 brought us problems and disrupted our way of life as a nation. It has redefined a lot of things. On the other hand, we should look at it as an opportunity for us to innovate and find better and efficient ways. We are transitioning to the new normal, as they say, but who will define the new normal? I say, it is really us that we will define it as we go along. Now, let me now talk about recommendation number 7 of the Global Commission for Urgent Action on Energy Efficiency, which is engaging all parts of society. Energy efficiency has played a major role in our country's quest for self-sustainability and reduce carbon footprint. Over a year ago, our Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act was signed into law by President Duterte. It emphasized the major role of energy efficiency for the Philippines to become energy self-sufficient. It also transforms energy efficiency and conservation into a national way of life. It was for this reason that we actively participated and provided insights in the work of the IEA's Global Commission for Urgent Action on Energy Efficiency. Along with other ministers and global industry leaders, the Commission has come up with a 10-point recommendation on how energy efficiency can play in the post-COVID-19 world. For the Philippine government, the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act has institutionalized the Government Energy Management Plan, which would increase government's energy utilization efficiency. While the government would be leading by example, business will also play a major role in ensuring the success of the law. In May 2020, we issued a policy for compliance of designated establishments on their obligation under the Energy Efficiency Conservation Act. Designated establishments are those with the commercial, industrial, and transport sectors with consumption of at least 100,000 kilowatt-hour or higher per annum. These establishments are required to integrate energy management policies into their business operations based on ISO 5001 Energy Management System or a similar framework. They are likewise tasked to set up programs for energy efficiency and conservation with annual targets and plans. I would like to emphasize that for a country like the Philippines, each kilowatt-hour we save from efficient energy utilization and management goes a long way towards enhancing our energy security levels. The Global Commission's 10-point recommendation will be a big boost to the attainment of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, which serve as a blueprint for building a sustainable future for all. Energy, which is a crucial component to achieving a majority of the other SDGs, is covered in SDG 7 under affordable and clean energy. Goal 7 has 3 targets to be achieved by 2030. namely universal access to affordable, reliable, and modern energy services, substantial increase in the share of renewable energy in global energy mix, and lastly, double the global rate of improvement in energy efficiency. The Philippines is on track in achieving the objectives of SDG 7. While the Philippine EE&C framework continues to develop, we are creating policies that will emphasize the economic gains of energy conservation as a direct benefit of utilizing energy efficient technologies. These include reforms in our energy service companies guidelines to optimize private sector investment mobilization. As we continue to learn from our implementation strategies, we look to the IEA as well as to the other model countries that have gone through a similar phase of launching a full blast energy efficiency and conservation campaign so that we may realize our vision of being an energy self-sufficient nation. We need solutions and we need them quickly. As we rise up to the challenge of sustainable development, our strategy is strongly anchored upon attaining the twin goals of energy security and sustainability. As the Philippine government works tirelessly to proactively meet the country's ever-changing energy demands, we see to it that the decision we make today will not endanger the ability of the future generations to fulfill their own needs. Without sacrificing the achievement of national energy security, we continue to support the development and utilization of renewable energy resources and technologies. Among the various policies we have relentlessly pursuing are the Renewable Portfolio Standard, a supply-side policy which mandate distribution utilities to source a minimum portion of energy from renewable sources. The Green Energy Option Program, which empower consumers to insist that the energy they consume is sourced from renewable resources. And the proposed Green Energy Pricing Program, which will augment RE capacity in the grid. This pricing program will support RE generators in securing power supply agreement and selling their energy through establishment of fair baseline price. Under the Duterte administration, the DOE has been aggressively pursuing three key strategies to attract investors and help ensure the availability of energy throughout the country. These strategies are establishing a conducive investment climate, attaining energy independence, and our technology-neutral policy. We have taken solid steps to make it easier for investors to do business in the country. There is now the Energy Investment Coordinating Council, as well as the Energy Virtual One-Stop Shop Law to harmonize, integrate, and streamline permitting processes and requirements for various energy projects. It is important for the Philippines to become energy self-sufficient. We cannot be at the mercy of global energy market volatilities and other geopolitical movements. In this light, we launched the Philippine Conventional Energy Contracting Program to facilitate the exploration and development of our indigenous energy resources and revitalize our upstream oil and gas sector. We at the DOE are finding ways on how we can further develop and promote our indigenous resources like hydro and geothermal. Let me now specifically focus on the third strategy, which is the role of technology-neutral policy in our energy program. I have been asked many times why we adopted this technology-neutral policy. We have to be real. We lack capacity and there is an urgent need for the Philippines to build its power capacity fast. And to attain energy security, we must make sure that we have abundant sources at this stage. We are giving investors the freedom to choose where to put their investments. This way, we are building our capacity without sacrificing the development of renewable resources which are indigenous to the country. Technology neutral means we welcome all forms of technologies to help us achieve our capacity targets at the soonest possible time. This technology neutral approach leads me to one of the most controversial and politicized topics in the Philippine energy sector, the utilization of nuclear power for energy security and efficiency. I strongly believe, and I have said this already several times in the past, it is high time for the Philippines to be open to the idea. Nuclear power is a reliable alternative to attain energy sufficiency and meet future power demands. To refresh our memories, the Philippines was one of the first Southeast Asian countries to embark on a nuclear power program with the creation of the Philippine Atomic Energy Commission in 1958. Two decades later, after the Commission's establishment, the country became host to Southeast Asia's only nuclear power plant in the 1980s. I'm referring to the 621 megawatt Bataan nuclear power plant. Its construction started in 1976 with a total investment amounting to $2.3 billion by the time it was completed in 1984. Unfortunately, the plant's operation never saw light. All those arguments that have been said against the nuclear power plant had been answered by time. In hindsight, the Philippine economy would have been different had we tapped nuclear power in the 1980s. The public perception on nuclear energy is also changing, as reflected in the nationwide survey that we commissioned last year. I'm pleased with the survey results, as it showed that the respondents are aware that nuclear energy possesses both benefits and risks. I'm still hopeful that the Philippines will be able to use nuclear energy in the future. For the past several years, the DOE, through our Nuclear Energy Program Implementing Organization, has been working closely with the International Atomic Energy Agency to assess the feasibility of safely and responsibly harnessing nuclear energy in the Philippines. I personally feel that the time is ripe for intensified and informed public discussion on nuclear energy, as well as its potential role in our energy security agenda. Today, in fact, the Philippines is the only Southeast Asian country that has an active nuclear power program. Ladies and gentlemen, the success of our energy efficiency program will not be realized until the private sector will be solidly behind us. The government can introduce policies and laws to make its country a haven for investments. But ultimately, we can only be successful in this endeavor if the titans of the industry, both local and foreign, will fully support us. And so I invite all the investors who are here today to take a closer look at the Philippines, your gateway to the Asia-Pacific region. Despite the COVID-19 pandemic, the Japan Credit Rating Agency recently gave the Philippines a stable outlook and upgraded its rating to A- from BBB+, citing the country's resiliency amid the crisis. With this positive outlook, the economy is still projected to be in good shape and the country's investment climate is still favorable. There will be many new opportunities for you to explore as a result of the country's increasing power demand, expanding industries, and growing population. In such a tight race against time and development, concerted efforts to drive continued innovation in the energy sector is of utmost importance. With the country's political stability and sustained economic growth, I can assure everyone that your investment in the Philippines will go a long way. In closing, let me share with you a quote attributed to 1997 Nobel Peace Laureate, the former US Secretary of Energy, Stephen Chu, which reads, and I quote, "As the saying goes, the Stone Age did not end because we ran out of stones. We transitioned to better solutions. The same opportunity lies before us with energy efficiency and clean energy," and unquote. This quotation also applies to our current situation. The COVID-19 pandemic is allowing us to find, innovate better solutions as we try to define our new normal. Indeed, the energy decisions we make today are not only meant to respond to the call of the time, but are made with the welfare of future generations in mind. Thank you very much, and I wish everyone a pleasant day ahead. Mabuhay.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary, and thank you for your leadership on the commission, as well as for staying up so late your time as well. Now, just to do a bit of a time check here, we've got about 18 minutes, and we still have 4 speakers, 1 keynoter and 3 panelists. So we'll try to move very efficiently if we possibly can. And going from late in the day, late in the night to early in the morning, we'll next turn to Senator Lisa Murkowski, who is chairman of the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee. I had the honor just a few weeks ago of testifying before her committee, and certainly I can tell you all, she's an incredibly skilled legislator, a leader, top leader in the U.S. Senate, and incredibly passionate and knowledgeable about all things energy and efficiency in particular. So Chairman Murkowski, over to you, and thanks for your patience for waiting.
Well, David, thank you very much for the very kind introduction, but thank you truly for joining us at the Energy Committee hearing. We were focusing on the impacts on the energy sector due to COVID-19, and the discussion was good, it was robust, but your contribution was greatly appreciated. I want to thank all my colleagues and wish you good morning or good evening or wherever in your day you are. Thank you for the opportunity to have this conversation today, to be online with fellow members of the Global Commission as we discuss energy efficiency. I think it's probably fair to say that none of us thought that we would find ourselves in the midst of a global pandemic as our commission report is being released. But as many have said this morning, I think that these circumstances that we find ourselves in today because of COVID have only added to the importance of finding and implementing sustainable policies that benefit our respective economies. As we recognize this global pandemic has impacted all of us, unlike other disasters that we might see in different parts of the world. This is something that has reached and has touched all and has disrupted our economies in such significant ways that it is perhaps a time for us to look at how we do business, how we align certain priorities, not only from a government perspective, but in how we influence behaviors. And so as we seek the silver lining at this time of a pandemic, I think much of what we're discussing here today is part of that. Here in the United States, we still have a very high, a very challenging COVID caseload. Many of our states are gradually reopening. Businesses are starting to reopen their doors. We're starting to see more road traffic. I was in my state of Alaska just yesterday. For those who know our geography, that is about a 9-hour flight for me to go from my home in Alaska to where I work here in Washington, D.C. And the air travel is starting to pick back up. So we're starting to see a little bit of that effort to reopen, while at the same time we're seeing our numbers continue to spike. So it is indeed a challenge on the health front, but also most notably on the economic front. We are spending considerable amounts of our time here in Congress discussing ways to help accelerate or move to economic recovery. The main focus right now is on putting people back to work, getting our children back into school. I'm going to keep my comments relatively brief this morning because we've just started yet another series of hearings, started about 15 minutes ago, that I've got to participate in on the economic recovery from the healthcare perspective. So again, much going on in terms of the response effort. As I mentioned, and you, David, we're were a participant in the hearing last week before the Energy Committee, focused on, again, the energy sector alone. We heard very clearly the economic impact on the energy sector has been significant. Some 600,000 jobs lost in the clean energy sector alone. That is obviously quite significant. And when Dr. Birol started out this discussion this morning, he said that energy efficiency is really about jobs, 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 and that's certainly true in this country. We are, as I mentioned, focusing on how we move forward with recovery efforts. We are discussing in the United States Senate the recovery package that will be put together. We will probably advance that in mid-July. The House is working through a large infrastructure package. They anticipate to have that advanced within the next couple of weeks here. There is a significant focus on clean energy and clean water, modernizing the electric grid, clean energy tax extensions. So there is an effort as we are working towards our reform packages to really try to advance what we can on the energy front, and certainly efficiency, the first fuel, will be part of that discussion. We all know as participants in the Global Commission, the value that efficiency brings, reducing costs, reducing emissions, saving fuel. It's something that all of us should be able to agree on. And yet it is still a fact here in this country that when we talk about how we advance energy efficiency, there are ways to do it that are not necessarily inspirational or motivational, but looking to how we can change behavior rather than putting mandates and standards that are required standards. I know that most that have spoken have mentioned the priority of having stricter standards or mandates. That's a challenge, a greater challenge for us here in the United States. And it has been one of the stumbling blocks as we have tried to advance legislation to further build out or further enhance our building codes. So we continue to work on that. But as I look to the recommendations that have come out through the Global Commission, I do think that our big challenge here is how we generate excitement for efficiency, how we increase the engagement across the sectors. And so when you look at the recommendations, recommendation number 7, engaging all parts of society, and recommendation number 8, leveraging behavioral insights for more effective policy, I think are key. A question was asked earlier, how we can work to get young people whose voices are so critical and so important when it comes to the issue of climate change, how we address it. That energy and enthusiasm needs to be channeled equally into how we can do more, how we can do better when it comes to energy efficiency. And I've said many times, I think sometimes people think that energy efficiency is kind of, well, we've already done that, or it's not as exciting in terms of technological advancements. And yet there is so much new, there is so much fresh when it comes to energy efficiency. And so getting our young people as excited about that as they are about some of the other initiatives, I think is an important part of what we can do. Here in the United States, I think what we are seeing, the efforts and the impact when governments work to improve their own efficiency is a leading by example opportunity for us, whether it's the federal level, the state level, or our local levels. Here at the federal level, we have a program called the Federal Energy Management Program. It helps agencies meet specific goals and, again, setting that good example for others. We've also seen considerable success with guidance programs like the Better Buildings Initiative. This allows our Department of Energy to partner with businesses to improve the efficiency of homes and buildings and industry. Their report, Department of Energy's report, came out the 9th of June. This was their annual report, and indicated savings nearly $11 billion over the last decade, while also avoiding 105 million tons of carbon emissions and reducing water use by 8.5 billion gallons. So again, recognition that you think it might not have as substantive an impact as new technologies, but these are new technologies being incorporated into existing infrastructure. Another program worth mentioning at the federal level is our Federal Weatherization Assistance Program, focusing on reducing energy costs for our low-income households by improving efficiency. It helps individuals and families save really thousands of dollars per year in their household, but also the jobs and the return on investment that we see. This is one area, as we were focusing on the impact of COVID, we did see a real decline or a drop in jobs when it comes to these types of programs. So I do think that this is, again, an area where you can not only provide benefit to efficiency, bringing about greater efficiency, but also boost the jobs. Several of those who spoke before me spoke to funding and investment. I think this is a key and a critical part of how we move forward. I'm also thinking of some new policies like a revolving loan fund for efficiency improvements that could come at little cost to taxpayers, but I think yield some pretty significant returns. I want to thank the IEA for the work that they have done on efficiency. I really do think that this can be a roadmap for us here in the United States and for others as we, again, work towards recovery following or as part of the pandemic. But I think we recognize, we all know, that this work began before the pandemic. It was IEA that pointed out that the global efficiency improvements were not occurring at a fast enough rate. That acknowledgement was important then, is even more important now. So the effort that has been done with the Global Commission is one that I'm very, very proud to be part of it. I think the fact that it has demonstrated a wide variety of ideas and different approaches to promote efficiency, along with identifying the challenges to adoption, are very, very key. But when you have a report like we have now that provides this menu of options to accelerate the use of energy efficient technologies, I think what you have, again, is a blueprint. It's a roadmap of clear and concise recommendations backed by best practices across the world. So I think we know that there is no one thing in the efficiency space that is the magic or the silver bullet. It is a multitude of options, and I think this is what we're seeing laid out. So I want to thank Dr. Birol. I want to thank you, Mr. Turk, Dr. Motherway, for your continued leadership on the issue. I look forward to further collaboration in this very, very important space. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Chairman Murkowski, and thanks not only for the kind words and the excellent partnership between our organization and your committee, but more importantly, thank you for your leadership in the U.S. and the U.S. Senate, but globally as well. Incredibly impressive, thoughtful voice. And good luck with all your bipartisan efforts, including the very important American Energy Innovation Act as well. So we wish you all the best of luck with your Senate colleagues, and thank you again for all the partnership.
Thank you.
All right. We will shift over to our panel, and we've got at least two of our panelists I think are still with us. Good. Gil, you're still there as well. And I know we're running out of time, Gil and Conde, and very much appreciate you being with us. And we certainly want to give you the opportunity to react to what you've heard from some of the keynote speakers, as well as to share your own thoughts as well. So, Gil, I'm going to turn to you first. For those who don't know Gil, he's the president and CEO of the New York Power Authority in the United States, and a real critical thought leader more generally within the U.S. and globally as well. Gil, so a few minutes over to you, and then Conde will let you have the final words. Please, Gil.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And good morning from New York City. This is such a timely conference. As the senator mentioned, this really got started before COVID, but it has now really magnified its importance as we're dealing with COVID, because energy efficiency is the biggest source of clean energy jobs amongst all the clean energy sectors, whether it's renewable and other type of clean energy. It was impacted in a big way here in New York, as well as across the United States. So it's one of the areas that we need to focus on, as mentioned by the speakers, to revitalize and restart our economy. And that's what we're doing here in New York. We're leading with energy efficiency because it is the biggest, it can have the biggest impact on jobs, as well as addressing our other goals, such as climate, under the leadership of Governor Andrew Cuomo. The only other thing I want to mention is the necessity to focus and to target low-income and minority communities when we start thinking about investing in energy efficiency and clean energy. Here in New York, it's been crystal clear that low to middle income and communities of color are the ones that have been impacted the most by first Superstorm Sandy back in 2012, and now by COVID-19. And it is imperative that as we look at stimulus funds and other type of programs, that there has to be a focus on addressing low income, middle income, and people of color in New York and really across the United States and across the world. The only other point I want to highlight is the need to inspire shared vision and to really inspire our young people to be more engaged and involved, but to meet them where they're at. You know, we need to figure out where they're at in terms of the way they learn, the way they process information, the way they operate in their social networks, to make sure that that we can engage them, because I believe that they're there. I believe that they care about the planet. I believe that they care about sustainability and having good jobs. It's just that, you know, that connection has not been made. So aside from the normal channels, like here in New York, we passed last year one of the most aggressive climate change law, again under the leadership of our governor, called the Climate Leadership and Protection Act, and have set an extremely aggressive energy efficiency goal of 185 trillion BTUs to be saved between now and 2025. The question now is, how do we do that? And we have created various councils of every segment of our economy, and it will work over the next 2 years to address specifically what this panel is about. How do we engage every sector of our society, from local governments to national, federal government here in the United States, labor, business, environmental groups, NGOs, communities, etc., to make sure that we lean in and that we actually produce an outcome in not just in climate change, but specifically in energy efficiency. So those are the two areas. The two areas are, it is imperative that we focus and we address the needs of low to middle income communities and people of color. And two, to energize our young people to be more engaged and to embrace the goals that we have put forth in this recommendation. So thank you again to IEA. I appreciate being included in this very, very important conference. Back to you, David. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gil, and thanks not only for your participation in the conference, but your leadership in the commission and all your day in and day out efforts in New York. It's quite impressive what you all are doing, and so thank you for all of those efforts. You mentioned the importance of inspiration, inspiring young people, but frankly, inspiring all of us to do more and do better. And I can think of no better way to close out this session than with my friend Kande Yumkela, who I don't think I need to introduce. Most people I've found know Kande and think very favorably and highly of him. He's the former UN Undersecretary General and CEO and Special Representative for their Secretary General and founding leader of SE for All. Kande, over to you for your closing remarks and inspiration. Thank you again for sticking with us, Kande. Over to you. And
thank you very much. It's been an honor and pleasure serving on the Energy Efficiency Commission. Let me put a little bit of our discussion in a broader context. The spread of COVID-19 in sub-Saharan Africa has been slower than many of the models had predicted. However, the economic impacts came much earlier than we thought because, of course, demand slowed down in China, demand slowed down in Europe and in the Americas. So immediately, the impacts were felt in Africa. So naturally, a lot of the support that has come to Africa now has focused on how do you provide quick liquidity to governments? How do you help them deal with bringing in essential commodities and also health supplies so that they can deal with the disease projections that we had seen? Therefore, we suspect already that there will be serious economic impacts when we look at supply side effects if a lot of the funds that have come are focused on emergency needs and stabilizing economies. So there has been a big challenge for governments to deal with their own economic viability, meeting payroll needs. In my country, up to 2 days ago, I was still in the provinces visiting COVID response centers. Health workers, the government is struggling to pay health workers on time, contact tracers on time. So you can imagine already before COVID, the discussion on energy efficiency did not exist. Now with COVID, it's even more difficult. So here are the things I recommend. My first recommendation would be that the IMF and the World Bank should walk the talk. They should walk the talk. If they're helping governments already put together COVID response plans, it is their responsibility as well to join us, the IEA and others, to say to those governments, access to energy and energy efficiency should be part of long-term building of resilience and also dealing with sustainability challenges. So that would be my first recommendation. I go to the comment Fatih Birol made at the opening, that the IEA is in discussions with the IMF and they agree on these three policy pillars: accelerating integration of solar and wind, modernizing electric grid systems, and energy efficiency. What I would say is all three are immediately and badly needed in Africa. Give you an example. If we urgently need to modernize the electric grid and expand production capacity, but also reduce technical and commercial losses. In some sub-Saharan African countries, these losses range from 20 to 40%. So energy efficiency is badly needed in the distribution systems and in the transmission systems. That's a key part of energy efficiency. If you take our recommendation number 6, that the public sector should set the example. One of the biggest demand centers for electrification is public buildings. They're everywhere. And some of them are the biggest debtors to the utilities. So I would say that yes, we accelerate energy efficiency in public buildings. And here again, we all have a responsibility to support that improvement in these public buildings. The public sector has to also walk the talk. Thirdly, we need to build capacity. I tell you, energy efficiency is still not top on the agenda. We need to support the regional energy efficiency centers, some of which I helped to establish during my days at UNIDO and Sustainable Energy for All. Now we have 5 regional centers in Africa. Can help do the energy audits, help the countries set energy efficiency targets, and also help governments understand that one of our biggest hopes is integrating the spread of renewable energy combined with energy efficiency. Energy efficient appliances in homes, energy efficiency appliances in rural communities to be able to use mini grids more effectively. This will be also linked to our recommendation 3 about jobs and growth. One of the things that COVID-19 exposed governments of is the lack of electrification in public primary healthcare units in the rural areas. They did not have power to begin with. So you can imagine me and others going around the country telling people to wash their hands. Well, they don't have power to supply the clean water. The health facilities do not have electrification to do basic testing. I have just spent 5 days. I returned to the capital yesterday evening at 7:45, rushing to come before the curfew. But I was out there in 5 districts explaining in rural communities about COVID. And then you visit the health centers, they don't have the basic supply of energy. So in short, what I would say is we need global collaboration, which is our last recommendation, number 9, and number 10. We need global collaboration to spread the word, to build capacities, to have the right regulations, to integrate access to energy through renewables and energy efficiency in the recovery plans. And of course, we need financing. Ideas are good, but I tell you, ideas combined with money will make us change systems. Lastly, clean cooking. If we can, in fact, begin to look at energy efficiency in clean cooking, it will solve a lot of problems. We just celebrated Earth Day. Let me just give you an indication here. If we switch use of firewood and charcoal to cleaner cooking solutions, we can reduce deforestation in Africa probably by 50–60%. My country has less than 5% of its forest cover left. However, there is a lot of illegal shipping of logs out of here, and of course, the big demand for charcoal and firewood, and we don't have a reliable supply of clean water in the city, in the main capital. This I see across African cities. There's a big problem with access to water, but in fact, charcoal and firewood is moving in. So we cannot talk about energy efficiency without also addressing the whole issue of access to clean cooking solutions that are more efficient and will use less of our forests. So thank you for having me give these short remarks here in this, but it's been a pleasure serving on this commission, and I've learned a lot from my colleagues, especially those from developing countries like Philippines, about what they're trying to do to address the dual challenge of access and also pushing efficiency and climate resilience. Thank you very much.
Kande, thank you very much indeed, and we appreciate some really inspiring remarks there. You've been very influential in our thinking in today's discussion and also in the Global Commission. And I'm sorry to all our colleagues that we didn't have more time to tease out these issues, but we heard some really excellent speakers from our ministers and our keynotes and from our panelists. So I do want to thank them all, thank them for their flexibility and patience, and thank them for their inspiring words. And as we draw this session to an end, I want to say to our audience, thank you very much. Session 5 will start in just 15 minutes. We have some more excellent speakers for you. So if you still have appetite for more inspiring words on energy efficiency, we hope to see you very shortly. And with that, we'll draw this session to a close. Thank you.